Hello and welcome to episode 82 of Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Doherty. Of course, I am your host, Rick Doherty. On today's show, Marissa from Chicago and I will move on from our discussion surrounding Universal Orlando Resort building the brand new theme park, Epic Universe. We ended that talk by bringing up the fact that Walt Disney World is gonna need to find a way to counter Epic Universe. Over the next two episodes, Marissa and I will talk about different ways WDW could incorporate more of their most popular property, Star Wars, into the parks to try to combat Universal's newest volley. Before that, my wife Courtney will join me for a dining review of Sanaa at Disney's Animal Kingdom Lodge that was recorded mere minutes after having the meal. This will be our first reaction to the experience. As most of you know by now, I walked Ireland's National Famine Way back in June to raise money and awareness in the fight against domestic violence. Every Monday, starting back on August 1st and continuing until Halloween, October 31st, I will be debuting a new vlog from Ireland on the Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Doherty YouTube page. In addition to documenting my travels, I will also be sharing information and statistics about domestic violence. I learned video editing specifically to bring you this documentation of my pilgrimage because it's that important to me to continue raising money and awareness in this way. Please make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel to keep up to date on these vlogs. In addition, I recently talked with Sarah from the Hiking Through Life podcast, and that conversation will be running sometime around Domestic Violence Awareness Month. As I have said, getting information about this fundraiser to as many people as possible is a high priority on my list. We teamed up with CASA of Pinellas County, Florida for our fundraising efforts. Every dollar that you donate will go directly to CASA as they try to help survivors of abuse. We're asking for a $20 donation at casapinellas.org/walkwithrick/. That's CASAPINELLAS.org/walkwithrick/. Unless something drastically changes and we extend it, we'll only be doing this fundraiser through the end of October, which, like I said, is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. I would love for you to take a few minutes right now so that you can make sure to be included in what we have accomplished. If you can't afford $20, we totally understand because there are no processing fees. A $15, $10, or even $5 donation will go directly to CASA, and your entire donation will make a difference. That's casapinellas.org/walkwithrick/. Right now, let's welcome my wife Courtney to talk about some food. Thanks for being here, Court.
Thanks for having me, Rick.
So we are outside at the Savannah at Disney's Animal Kingdom Lodge. We just had lunch at Sanaa, and now we're staring at the beautiful animals outside at the Savannah. I see a giraffe eating. There's some zebras behind us, and if you can hear in the background, there's also lightning in the distance. Look at, there is a giraffe maybe 40 yards from us right now, just walking, and it is a really, really cool view. There is lightning in the distance, at least thunder that we're hearing, so we're gonna try to do this dining review pretty quickly. We ate at Sanaa, which, like I said, is at Disney's Animal Kingdom Lodge, and we decided that we were going to not have a huge meal because we actually have a dining reservation later tonight. The big thing, the thing everybody has to try at Sanaa, is the Indian style bread service. This is a choice of 5 breads and with all 9 accompaniments. So this is traditional naan, garlic ginger naan, spiced naan, onion kulcha, or paneer paratha. We had all of the different types of bread slash naan bread. Then the accompaniments: cucumber raita, roasted red pepper hummus, mango chutney,
tomato date jam, the tamarind chutney, coriander chutney, garlic pickle, red chili sambal, and the spicy jalapeno lime pickle. So the first thing I'm going to say is the roasted red pepper hummus is, I believe, the exact same roasted red pepper hummus that you can get at Tiffin's in Disney's Animal Kingdom theme park. And that is one of my favorite dishes already. Tiffin's is my favorite restaurant on property, and a big reason for that is this roasted red pepper hummus. So I already knew that was going to be a star of the show. Courtney, what were some of your favorite of the accompaniments, these sauces for the bread service at Sanaa?
The coriander chutney really stood out to me. It was kind of like a pesto, really similar to a pesto, and I'm someone who loves that. You know, flavorful, fresh, herb-like, kind of earthy, but, you know, a flavor that is not too out there for people who aren't that adventurous. And actually, I would say all of these are, you know, extremely fresh and traditional, and everything is made in the restaurant fresh. So that comes through. While being a little bit of different spices or different herbs or some different things that you're maybe not used to, I don't think that someone who is not really a very adventurous eater, I think you would still enjoy this. I know I loved it. I basically loved every single thing. The only thing that I wasn't a huge fan of, and I would rank as maybe my least favorite, would be the tomato date jam. It was just more on the tomatoey side, and it was just something maybe a little too different that just didn't necessarily appeal to me as much. The tamarind was really good, and you know, the cucumber raita is kind of a yogurty, almost like a tzatziki, so that's nice and creamy. You can eat that with anything. It will pare down some of the spice, but just the perfect amount of spice for me on a lot of these.
So the tomato date jam, I'm going to agree with you on that. I felt that it was just thoroughly average. Like, it wasn't that I didn't like it. It was just, I can get something like that at any restaurant. It wasn't special. Everything else was really, really special, was really quality. I loved the spicy jalapeno lime pickle. It was the perfect combination of flavors where it was spicy, but you got the flavor before you got the spice. And that's important to me. I like when the spice sort of wakes up your tongue and makes you taste the flavors more, rather than dulls your tongue so that you can't taste the flavors. It's one of those tricks that a lot of, for example, bars use. That's one of the reasons that pub food is often spicy. They don't have the ability to make quality food, so they overwhelm you with spice so you can't taste it. But sometimes, if the spice comes in after you get the flavors, it enhances those flavors. And I thought that was the spicy jalapeno lime pickle. The red chili sambal was really good. It was something that I liked a lot, but it maybe wasn't as good as the spicy jalapeno lime pickle, so it slid down a little bit on my list. Now, Courtney, I want to ask, what was the one that I really, really enjoyed? I can't remember. It was a little sweeter and had a vinegar flavor to it.
Oh, that would be the tamarind chutney.
This was awesome, and I'm not usually a fan of eating sweet, and I did really, really like this even with that. I also got the samosas as an appetizer. Just so you know, the Indian style bread service, by the way, is $21. The samosas is $10, 100% plant-based. It's potato and pea samosas with tamarind and mango chutney. The chutney really went well with the samosas. You got two fairly thick samosas with this appetizer, and my suggestion is to cut the samosa in half, put your fork in it, dip it in the chutney, and then eat it like that, because all of the flavors need to be there together to really give you the full enjoyment of this appetizer. Courtney, you had one of the samosas as well. What did you think?
I absolutely loved this. Now, I will say, if you are sensitive to spice, it might be a little bit too spicy for you. I used to think I was very sensitive to spice, and then I ventured into eating some Mexican food and Indian food, and I built up a little bit of a tolerance to at least have a mild, sometimes I think medium, but more like mild, I think, tolerance, where I do enjoy a little bit of spice. And that was there, and some of the bites were maybe a little more lingering with you than others. So it was almost just a little too spicy for me, like if I was eating a lot of it, but it was perfect. I really loved it. And yeah, the samosas definitely, again, felt fresh, made in restaurant, traditional, and all of those wonderful spices and flavors were there.
Now, for dessert, it was actually around my birthday when we had this meal, and our server was Nina from Tampa, Florida. She was incredible, and she brought out a special dessert in honor of my birthday. It was sort of like a cheesecakey ice cream dish. It's not actually on the menu, so I don't know exactly what was involved, but this was really good. And the ice cream, the cheesecake texture really went well with the fresh fruit that was on top. There were blackberries, blueberries, and strawberries on top, and the nature of the dessert itself was that it brought out the flavors of the fresh fruit instead of just overwhelming you with a sweet ice cream flavor. I really liked that. It was complimentary. I really appreciate that little pixie dust moment that we got from Walt Disney World. But I did order the Serradora, which is butterscotch pudding, almond coffee streusel, pineapple mango, and Breton shortbread. This is $7. I was really pleasantly surprised by this. I didn't know how pineapple and mango was gonna mesh. You can hear the thunder in the distance, but we are still dry, and we'll finish this review before we head for shelter. I didn't know how the butterscotch was going to mix with the pineapple mango and almond coffee streusel, but none of the flavors were so overpowering that they didn't just blend really well together. It really blended well together, and it was a small portion for $7, but it's Disney. It's a signature, it's not a signature dining location, but it's at a deluxe resort, so you're gonna pay a little more. I don't think it was out of the realm of possibility that this was a pretty affordable dessert, considering I really liked it, and I would get it again even. The shortbread, if you kind of smash it up a little bit and get it on your spoon with all of the other flavors at the same time, that's the way to eat this, and to get all of those different flavors hitting your tongue at the same time. And then we had to try the freshly brewed Joffrey's coffee, the press pot coffee from Kenya. This is $9. I've had it before at Boma. This was Courtney's first time having it. I'm actually still drinking it even as we're doing this review, because they give you a pretty decent sized pot. I think if you're a party of two, both people will get 2 cups of coffee out of this pot. I don't know how to describe why coffee is good and some coffee isn't as good. I just know that this is the best coffee I've ever had in my life. Like, when I had it at Boma, I thought that. Having it now today, I thought that as well. Courtney, you're more of a coffee drinker than me. What did you think?
I am a coffee drinker, however, I am not yet a connoisseur. I like to have coffee, for caffeine, to wake me up. I have started to really enjoy the flavor of coffee and, not putting too much cream or sugar. And this was outstanding. Full-bodied, but without tasting overpowering, and certainly not kind of burnt, which some, coffees kind of can have a little bit of a burnt flavor. And then they give you nice fresh cream, and, I added a little of that. And just to sit there and enjoy that wonderful flavor, looking out on the savannah on a rainy afternoon was the perfect complement. A light lunch and being able to sit there and have a little dessert and a coffee just rounded everything out perfectly.
I would say this press pot coffee could just be your dessert if you're not a big fan of sweets and you just wanted to sit there for a few minutes, have a nice conversation after your meal. Get this coffee, you're not going to regret it. Sanaa at Disney's Animal Kingdom Lodge is a great restaurant. Nina from Tampa, Florida was a fantastic server. Want to give her all the props in the world. I definitely recommend this. So if you ever get the chance, head to Sanaa at Disney's Animal Kingdom Lodge. Thanks for joining me again, Courtney.
Thanks so much for having me, Rick.
Please make sure to subscribe to the Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Doherty YouTube channel. As we continue to grow this thing, you will want to make sure that you are up to date on everything going on at the theme parks and other areas of travel. Let's bring back our good friend Marissa from Chicago to the show. Thanks for joining us, Marissa.
Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
So in our last episode, we talked about Universal Orlando Resort building their brand new theme park, Epic Universe, and we ended by saying Walt Disney World is going to have an answer for Epic Universe. And Marissa's thought was the easiest thing for Disney to do to try to counteract Epic Universe at Universal Orlando Resort is to bring more Star Wars into the parks, because that is their number one intellectual property, at least until they can bring the Marvel Cinematic Universe over to the East Coast. That's a whole nother topic for another episode. So we are now going to have fun sort of daydreaming about how they could incorporate more Star Wars into Walt Disney World. We're going to start in the most obvious location, and that's Star Wars Galaxy's Edge. Anybody who's listening who may not know, Star Wars Galaxy's Edge takes place on the planet of Batuu, in between The Last Jedi, Episode 8 in the Skywalker Saga, and Episode 9, which is The Rise of Skywalker. That's why you don't see a young Luke Skywalker or a young Han Solo walking around Star Wars Galaxy's Edge. Now, the first question we have to address, do you think they stick to that timeline?
I don't know. It seems like recently they've been kind of pulling back from the timeline, just in the sense that there's really not a whole lot there besides Rey kind of walking around and sometimes Chewie that really points to it being this firm place in time, or this exact moment in time. And I think that Disney internally is really having this debate of whether they want to stick to the timeline or not. And I think it's kind of showing. And I think they need to really decide one way or the other. They need to either say, you know what, it's not worth it. Let's strip the timeline and let's just put all the characters we know and love and let's let everyone have fun on Batuu. Or they need to say, no, we're sticking to this timeline, and they need to make Batuu a place in time that people care about. I know we've talked about it before, but I think that If they're going to bring these new independent characters into the land, put them in a TV show. Make the characters we already know, like The Mandalorian. Visit Batuu for an episode. Give us a sense that this is a real thriving place on a planet that we can kind of enjoy and experience. And even if people are visiting it outside of the timeline, it still kind of fleshes out what this world is supposed to be. Personally, I don't have too much of a stake in whether or not they keep the timeline. I really like the atmosphere Galaxy's Edge has right now, so I would like to see the timeline stick, but I don't think stripping it would be that bad.
So when they made the decision on the timeline, there were a bunch of reasons they made it, and all of them make sense. Everybody was talking about the immersion at the Wizarding World of Harry Potter and how it was very, very detailed. And Disney wanted to say, oh, you think you have details? Well, this takes place in a particular time. This is canon. You're part of Star Wars when you're at Star Wars Galaxy's Edge. And it made sense because The Last Jedi was the previous Star Wars movie to be released in the Skywalker saga. And we were waiting on The Rise of Skywalker. So when it opened, we were actually in that timeline, sort of. Now it doesn't look like, at least for a while, they're going to be exploring that particular time period in anything. All of the Disney Plus live shows have been between The Return of the Jedi and The Force Awakens. So it's been in that gap in between those two movies in the Star Wars timeline. So there's nothing new that's going to happen with those characters that are on Batuu. We're not going to be learning anything new about them for quite some time, probably. So it does make it feel kind of stale. I also understand they wanted to promote those movies, but then The Rise of Skywalker made its $2 billion or however much it made, and now there's nothing to promote there anymore. I think they've weirdly backed themselves into a corner. And I know when we were talking about Epic Universe possibly having a Harry Potter land and Universal would get some backlash for it, and you were like, but they don't care as long as those checks keep coming in. As long as people keep swiping that debit card for a butterbeer, they don't care. There might be some pushback from hardcore theme park fans if they broke the timeline, but I'll tell you what, there won't be pushback from the old school Star Wars fans. They'll be stoked to see Luke Skywalker walking around Batuu. They'll be thrilled to see Vader. The only people who are going to be upset about it are kind of people like Marissa and I, because we're nerds about theme parks, but we make up such a small percentage of their business that they're not going to care what we say. Oh, well, it's not thematically consistent, whatever. So I definitely could see them breaking the timeline. But I think what I would rather see is adding Star Wars more places throughout Walt Disney World, but first, more places in Hollywood studios. There is right now Star Wars Launch Bay. At Star Wars Launch Bay, you can meet Chewbacca, you can meet Darth Vader, and you can meet BB-8. There are also some props from some of the movies in there, and there's a store because it's Disney, so there's always a store. The first thing I think you need to do in Star Wars Launch Bay is get the Chewbacca meet and greet out of there, because you can meet Chewbacca in Star Wars Galaxy's Edge. So right there, you can have whatever's the new hot Disney Plus property. You can meet Boba Fett, you could meet Fennec Shand, you could meet The Mandalorian. I know we've talked about something that is looking even more and more like it could potentially be a reality in the past, so why don't you talk about that?
Yeah, we've talked about before how it would be absolutely brilliant for them to add a Grogu meet and greet. They've got that great little setup type thing for BB-8 where he just kind of sits there and beeps at you. And that's exactly what you need for Baby Yoda. We've recently seen a little bit of a prototype of a Baby Yoda sitting in his little egg carrier. and he interacts with the world around him. So it's looking like that could be a possibility.
They were selling that Baby Yoda, the animatronic Baby Yoda who could interact with people around him, for $85,000 to $100,000. Now, if Disney bought a bunch of them, they would get them much closer to that 85 number. They could probably get them closer to about 70,000 if they got a number of them. If you had sort of a series of walkways where you couldn't really tell what was going to happen, and they could sneak, like with that Disney magic, 4 or 5 different Baby Yodas that people could meet, that would single-handedly take care of a lot of problems with Hollywood studios, because that would just eat so many people waiting in line for that meet and greet. It would become a must-do. You'd probably need a lightning lane for it.
I could see that being an individual lightning lane with how many people would be interested in that. I also think that, going back to Galaxy's Edge briefly, this is on the topic of meet and greets, I think that a really easy way to break the timeline without breaking the timeline would be adding quote-unquote Force Ghost meet and greets. Throw a couple of your favorite Jedis in there, but say it's a Force Ghost. They show up. We have it established in canon that these characters show up as Force Ghosts as whatever period in time as they want. Toss them in there. Go ahead and meet some of your favorite characters. Meet Anakin, Obi-Wan, Qui-Gon Jinn. Really throw some cool characters in there, and you're technically not ruining anything.
Disney, Marissa is letting you know she needs an Obi-Wan Kenobi meet and greet. She doesn't care how it happens, but she needs to get an Obi-Wan Kenobi meet and greet. I agree with you, but now we have discussed in the past, and I think this is the perfect time to do it. There is an area right past Rock and Roller Coaster, which may include Rock and Roller Coaster because that's probably going away sometime soon. And then there's also Lightning McQueen's Racing Academy, which from day one has felt like a temporary attraction. That does not feel like that is permanent whatsoever. That would be a perfect patch of land to do a Star Wars expansion. So what would you want to see, Marissa? Would you want to see something from the original trilogy? Would you want to see something from the prequels? Is Tatooine too played out at this point?
Yeah, I think while Tatooine is probably the most recognizable planet, I think they kind of shot themselves in the foot a little bit because you've already got a desert planet with Batuu. So I think it would be kind of not as exciting to see another desert planet come up because, landscaping wise, there's not going to be a whole lot of difference between Tatooine and Batuu. What I would like to see, and I think that we do need to see something familiar. I think that, like you've touched on with the Wizarding World, the nostalgia pull there is so strong. You feel like you're stepping into a location from a movie you watched. I think that Disney needs a little of that pull with Star Wars. So I think it needs to be somewhere we've seen before. My personal vote would be for Endor. It could look really cool. It has the potential to really feel like you're stepping off planet if they theme it right. And also, Endor is a forest planet. So think about if they theme that, that could potentially be the only place in Hollywood studios with actual shade. Game changer.
I often bring up the fact that Toy Story Land in Hollywood studios is the hottest place on the planet. I don't know if we'll ever get people to the surface of the sun, but if they do, it will be to take a vacation from Toy Story Land. After that, Animal Kingdom is super hot. But right after Animal Kingdom, it's Galaxy's Edge. So 2 of the absolute hottest places on property are in Hollywood studios. Sometimes if the queue for Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway stretches outside, that gets ridiculously hot. It is a very hot time of year, so this is definitely top of mind for us right now. But it would be brilliant to bring some shade to Hollywood studios. And it would be brilliant for Disney to start adding more shade in general. Because if you look at old pictures of Magic Kingdom, I remember being in Magic Kingdom when I was a kid and worrying about where the trees were when you were planning where to stand for fireworks. There are no trees on Main Street USA anymore. You try to explain that to somebody, they'd think you're crazy. I think it's Michael Eisner, but I don't remember why he was making the speech. But there's video of him making a speech in front of Cinderella Castle, and there's video behind him, and he's looking out, and all you see are trees. They have definitely gone away from that. I don't know if it's too expensive, but I think Marissa and I are kind of doing our armchair Imagineering as if budget isn't a problem. So more trees would be a benefit, and that would have people gravitate towards that land in the middle of the day, which would relax the pressure on the line for Slinky Dog Dash, for Rise of the Resistance, for Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway. It might spread out the crowds more if you had some shade.
It's such an important part of the park. I know we've talked about it a lot, about how such a big part of the Hollywood Studios experience is the crowds and getting stuck in the crowds at certain parts. So I think anything they can do to alleviate that is going to make a big positive impact on the park. And certainly, a new land is going to eat up way more people than the Racing Academy ever will. The Racing Academy is always empty. That's just a fact. And it really doesn't feel permanent. So I think if something were to replace it, Endor or another land would be solid. But I have said before that one thing I'd really, really like to see is an actual physical roller coaster. And I think that there's that scene when they're on Endor and they're being chased by the stormtroopers on those little flying motorbike type things. It's the perfect setup for a coaster. Give us something like that. You've already got technology, being processed in a similar way with Tron, where you're sitting on a vehicle like that. Give us a coaster where we're racing through the forest and there's stormtroopers and there's Ewoks in the trees trying to help us. And it could be this really cool, immersive, actual physical coaster that I think the land really needs.
Wow, that is a good idea, Marissa, because it would be a fairly family-friendly roller coaster. I envision it being fast, but not a lot of drops, almost like Hagrid's over at Universal's Islands of Adventure. It would be very similar to that, going through a very scenic, very wooded area, but then it would also have some of that Tron technology. As you mentioned, there are always 2.5 hour lines for Slinky Dog Dash, which is a family-friendly roller coaster in Toy Story Land that is well themed. You add another one, you ease some of that pressure for the lines, you create this e-ticket attraction that's going to sell you merchandise, that's going to drag people to that section of the park. All you would have to do is put that one ride back there, open a couple food carts and merchandise locations, have some characters running around, and all of a sudden that's a balanced park. You'd have Endor and Tower of Terror kind of right next to each other, and then you can move down Sunset and you'd get close to Mickey and Minnie's, and then all of that Hollywood Boulevard stuff with the character cavalcades and the character meet and greets. You would have Launch Bay over there with even more Star Wars, and then they could just drift over towards Star Wars Galaxy's Edge and towards Toy Story Land. Yeah, I think that would really balance out the park. And I'm not saying it would be a direct answer to Epic Universe, but all of a sudden Hollywood Studios becomes a more important park to visit again.
I don't think anything short of a fifth gate will be an answer to Epic Universe, but I think something like adding that other land would really bring Hollywood Studios full circle. It would make it feel a little more thematically tied together. And right now, in my opinion, it's a half-day park, unless you get there on a day when it's crowded, and then it's a full-day park, not because there's so much to do, but because you're stuck in these 2-hour long lines just waiting all day long. So you alleviate that, you give people more to do, you make the line shorter because there's more to do. All of a sudden, you've got a park that's a much more enjoyable experience. People want to spend more time there. People are going to spend more food money there, more merch money there. I mean, heck, you could take that other land and put like a rebel training show in there. Make it look like you're in the rebel secret base and they're doing a training thing, kind of like the Indiana Jones stunt spectacular. Then you've got an even larger people eating experience. And then that kind of takes the pressure off of Slinky Dog, takes the pressure off of Rise of the Resistance, of Tower of Terror, of Mickey and Minnie. And you can kind of slow down and enjoy the park instead of rushing from line to line.
This has been episode 82 of Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Doherty. To hear Marissa and I talk about Epic Universe in more detail, check out episode 81 of the podcast. For more of our conversation about how to incorporate Star Wars into Walt Disney World, you're going to want to tune in to a brand new episode next Thursday. Until then, have a great week.